Fiddle again, and hello, it's Vo, and welcome back to our playthrough of MTG Arena. We're continuing on with our Merfolk for this week. I want to go in and have us see what we can take out, what we can put in. As I mentioned before, we want to take out a couple of the exploring Merfolk, switch them up for something else, because we have the enchantment that we can make all creatures explore when they come into play. Don't need Charter Course or One with the Wind. We're going to have creatures just be unblockable rather than relying on the traditional evasion methods of flying or trample, things like that. So we can go ahead and take out quite a few things. Exploring Merfolk we don't need. Walker of the Wilds, I'm not so sure about him. We'll take him out for now. Again, we don't need a flying one. So Curious Obsession is good for drawing us cards. Put it on our unblockable creatures. We do need another River Sneak, I think. River Sneak is going to do well. Gets +1/+1 for each time a Merfolk enters the battlefield. Only lasts till end of turn, but if we have a couple of copies of the enchantment out that says we create a 1/1 Merfolk whenever we cast a Merfolk spell, and we can lay, say, 2 Merfolk that turn, then he'll be getting +4/+4, and he's unblockable. And then he's a 5/5 unblockable that attacks, you know. So we get a second copy of Deep-Root Waters, so we can set that up to be a reality. We've also got the Tempest Caller. I'm not sure if we want another copy, but maybe have Kamana's Awakening. We are quite likely to get to Ascend if we can create some tokens. It's maybe all the blue ones. Maybe we want Rivers Rebuke to bounce all our opponent's stuff away. It's a potential add to the deck. In green, we probably want the third copy of River Herald's Boon. It's a great combat trick for us. And the deck is the River Herald, so it's the card the deck deserves. Jungleborn Pioneer is a potential add. You know, there's maybe more useful Merfolk, but the Swift Warden will keep in being able to save one of our creatures, our biggest creature, from a spell or an ability is powerful, useful. See, if we put in our one Path of Discovery here, instead of all the Exploding Merfolk, just means that all our Merfolk explore, and we can choose the ones with the better abilities. Put Walker of the Wilds back in, since we haven't seen anything more amazing. I think we only need one Shapers of Nature. Could put in a second one. We'd really like to get a second Merfolk Mistbender, but of course we don't have any uncommon wild cards left. So we'll just have to win a few games, get some coins, open some packs, try and get an uncommon wild card, And then we can get a second misspender. Just having a quick look back through. Do need a couple more cards. We can choose things to bounce our opponent's creatures back to hand. We can choose counter spells. There is a mythic Merfolk that we don't have highlighted in the collection, so it's maybe time to spend our mythic rare wild card. I think it's both green and blue, so I'll have to get through into the multicolored cards. Here we are. This is not a card we have, it's a mythic rare. It's quite powerful. Once you get 3 Merfolk out, then you can use its ability to tap 3 Merfolk to draw a card. Or if you have 5 Merfolk, you can tap 5 Merfolk to put a +1/+1 counter on all your Merfolk creatures. So if we can pull that off at some point, we can pump up the whole squad. Seeing it done, it can really lock games out. Now a couple more spaces. Really want to get to the Vanquisher's banner that we've seen before, and perhaps the Immortal Sun as well. And then we can make the same land trades, put in the Arch because we're likely to hit Ascend, get the City's Blessing. And we can also put in a Field of Ruin to stop our opponent's powerful lands, destroy them. Swap them out for 2 forests and an island, I think. Most of our early plays are blue, so we're going to want to keep the majority of our lands being islands over forests. So 10-9 split is fine. Let's go ahead and get into a game. Come on, matchmaking. Well, could be worse, could be 4. Rank 3. Well, we'll give it a go. Let's see if that mythic rare card can do as well here. So we're going to lead with a forest. Doesn't make much difference. Follow it up with an island. No turn 2 plays for us, but no turn 2 plays for our opponent, it seems, either, so nope. End step opt. Gonna scry, then draw. Perhaps looking for land if they're got no land left. And they're gonna duress us. They're gonna have a look at our hand and take a non-creature spell away, probably the banner. So they choose a card for us to discard and just put away into our graveyard. But it can't be a creature or a land. So they take the dive down, so they probably playing a lot of kill spells. They don't want us giving our creatures hexproof. So the question is, should we play our Mythic Rare? I don't think we've got much other choices. Our opponent is going to counter everything and kill whatever makes it through past the counter spells. So we're probably not going to see many creatures from our opponent. We're yet to see how they intend on winning. Guess we get the Forerunner again. See if the opponent has another counter spell. They do. It's creature specific counter spell. Hopefully next turn we can get out the banner. Then if we follow that up with the River Sneak, it'll draw us a card when we play the River Sneak. I don't think we have to start desperately getting creatures into play to block, because our opponent has no creatures at all. Okay, so our opponent's playing Scarab God, which is probably the most powerful card going at the moment in standard format. So our opponent can pay 4 and get a creature out of a graveyard, exile it from the graveyard, and get a 4/4 zombie token copy of that creature into play under their control. So we've got 2 creatures in our graveyard, and our opponent can essentially eternalize them. Get them back as 4/4 zombie token copies of themselves. So our opponent's going to use the ability and steal one of our creatures essentially. So they take the Forerunner. They're not likely to have any Merfolk in their deck, so they can't put one on top. Gonna get out the Oracle so we can start drawing cards. So we draw one from the banner. When we play a Merfolk, we create a Merfolk token, which gets +1/+1 from the banner. Now when we cast the Mistbender, we get to draw a card from the banner. We get to create another token, and all the Merfolk get +1/+1. The River Sneak's ability has gone off several times, and now it can get in for much more damage. This is why we put an extra one in the deck for these sort of circumstances. We can chain together a couple of Merfolk in the same turn, then it's going to get massive. So our opponent really needs to kill everything in one go. Maybe Bontu's Last Reckoning or something like that. Going to use the ability to steal our Mythic Rare. I guess if another Merfolk was to go into the graveyard, their opponent could steal it. They could start using the ability to tap 3 Merfolk and draw a card. We're not going to give them that opportunity. We're only going to attack in with the unblockable creatures. So in comes another Herald, which itself is unblockable. We have enough mana left over to cast the Immortal Sun. Opponent not countering it. If they did have a counter spell, that was the time, I think. So that again gives all our creatures +1/+1. And lets us draw an extra card at the start of our go. So we're in a pretty good position. Probably swing in with everyone and kill them next turn. Well, if Scarab God is legendary, so when you cast the Scarab God for the second time, if there's already one on the battlefield and then you try to lay a second one, you're going to have to choose one and sacrifice the other. You can't have 2 copies of the same legendary permanent on the battlefield at the same time. So I don't know if my opponent didn't know that and just scooped it up in anger because they made a mistake, or they literally had nothing else to do because they perhaps had 2 more Scarab Gods in their hands so they couldn't lay them and they knew they were dead. Maybe try to show us that that's all they had. Not really sure about that. But yeah, you cannot have 2 copies of the same legendary permanent. Scarab God is legendary, so when the opponent tried to lay the second one, the game made him choose to keep one and the other one gets sent to the graveyard. So we're going to move on here. Play our second game. Seems great. We've only got 1 creature, but we've got Deep Root Waters and Hadonna's Climb. So if we can get up to 3 and then cast either of those, really, whichever order we play them in. Before we get a chance to do anything though, our opponent's going to duress us and probably take one of those. They're both really powerful. Takes the Hadonna's Climb. Doesn't want us putting +1/+1 counters on our creatures. We'll be quite happy if we can get out Deep Root Waters on turn 3 and then a Merfolk on turn 4. Oh, opponent doesn't have a 3rd land. I like that a lot. Okay, so we'll go with the plan. We'll get out Deep Root Waters. Start building up an army. So opponent finds their 3rd land. Okay, an exploring deck. So they've got a 1/1 menace, and it can has the ability that it can explore if you pay 1 and you discard a card. Seems a bit extreme, but maybe over the course of a game can build up with a few +1/+1 counters on it, help you filter through the deck. Can get out the Oracle. It's going to create a token. Opponent's going to explore. Finds a forest. So both green and black exploring deck. Perhaps they're going to have the Wild Growth Walker. Yes, here he is. Okay, Wild Growth Walker. He's a staple of exploring deck. You just need him and a bunch of things that explore. You have 4 copies of the Wild Growth Walker. Over the course of a game, the Wild Growth Walker will become massive, and it'll gain you back a whole bunch of life. We're going to get our River Sneak, so we can start getting in for unblockable damage. Next turn we can give it Curious Obsession. But here if we leave up the 2 mana, then we can perhaps surprise our opponent. If they want to play a kill spell on one of our creatures, we can play Dive Down. Also use River Herald's Boon if we need to. Perhaps put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature before our opponent plays Moment of Craving. That could be trouble for us. So the Chupacabra says that whenever they explore, they can give a creature -2/2. So if they do it now, we can still use Dive Down to protect our creature. Because they have that 1 mana left over, they can use the first creature's ability at any time to discard a card and explore. I want to get out another River Snake, but we need to leave up all this mana. Keeping back our surprises. See if our opponent goes for it here. No. Maybe the cards in their hand are so amazing they don't want to discard them, but if we can actually make it through with a River Snake and draw a card, it'll all be worth it. Our opponent should certainly use the ability now. They can't know that we can protect it. Well, they're gonna let it through. We're taking 2 and we're drawing a card. And we get an extra land, that's what we need. 2 lands stuck together like buses, that's fine. If we get at the island, then we can cast the River Sneak and leave up option of casting River Herald's Boon and Dive Down. If we don't, then we can leave up both Dive Down and River Herald's Boon for ultimate protection. Don't want to get out the River Snake really to give them 2 targets. Okay, so they're going to wait until the end step. We're going to use the ability. We're going to let the ability go through. We're going to put another exploring creature on top, I presume. Then the trigger comes along for this. But it's interrupted by the trigger for the Wild Growth Walker. Okay. So we'll allow the Wild Growth Walker trigger. And then at this point, when this trigger's on the stack, all we need to do is do the River Herald's Boon. And we can spread out the 2 counters over our River Snake and then the Oracle. That way our creature only goes down to 1/1. They don't have any mana to do it again. We've still got Dive Down as an option, should they be able to double explore next turn. Then back up to 21. It's the power of the Wild Growth Walker. It's quite easy to build a deck around. Jungle Creeper, they can keep discarding out of their hand. And then bringing it back to their hand. Again, we're gonna let the first trigger resolve. And then we're gonna cast Dive Down. So our creature gets hexproof, so that our opponent's trigger won't resolve. They've decided to give our creature -2/-2, and then we've got in the way of that by giving it hexproof. Then the first trigger can't resolve. The stack works last in, first out. So our opponent can respond to our dive down, and if they can double explore and take it down twice before our dive down, then they will win the battle, as it were. So they got Moment of Craven and managed to kill it before our dive down resolved, because they could do things at instant speed. They had an instant card, and they had an ability that they could use at any time. That's a good introduction to the way the stack works. When players are casting spells in response to each other at instant speed. So we go down the banner. We've got another River Sneak in hand. When we cast it, we'll get to draw a card and create a token. We're going to hopefully build up a good defense, so our opponent doesn't run us over before we get a chance to come back and get a few more unblockable creatures on the go. So our opponent can cast the Jungle Keeper or discard it to explore, and then get it back, perhaps next turn. If they've got a land on top, they can explore into the land, lay the land, and then cast the Jungle Creeper from the graveyard, or get it back to hand, sorry. Setting up to cast it the following turn. So they indeed explore. They see they've got Chupacabra on top, which can destroy our Oracle. Not a land, so they can't use the Jungle Creeper's ability to get it back to hand from the graveyard. They do have a 5/7 and a 4/4. They're just getting in with a 5/7. We're just gonna let it through. I think we can set up a pretty good defense. Tap the lands manually, make sure everything goes fine. It's a habit to get into, because the game will sometimes do the wrong thing, as we've learned the hard way. Maybe get a Kapala. Don't know. I think the abilities that are gonna give us -2/-2 are triggered abilities rather than activated abilities. So Kapala doesn't save us from the -2/-2 triggers or the Chupacabra trigger. Swift Warden would protect us from the Chupacabra trigger or a -2/-2 trigger. So hopefully we'll see what happens. See what our opponent decides to use Chupacabra on. Still on 11 life. We have 4 2/2 creatures, so we could block with all of them if our opponent doesn't explode again this turn. If our opponent attacks him with a Wild Growth Walker. Here we go, so they're just passing to us. We could do Commander's Awakening, but I think it's better to get more creatures, get more triggers, draw more cards, create more creatures. So our opponent could have tried to get a trigger as our triggers were resolving to get the River Sneak while it was a 2/2, but looks like they're prepared to take it. They're on 32. Now we could attack in with our 4/5 because it would be unblockable because it has a counter on it. Just want to hold back on defense. And if we just save our 3 mana, then we can cast a Swift Warden to protect whichever one of our creatures our opponent wants to destroy with the Chupacabra. Jungle Creeper coming back to hand. It's a very slow and clunky combo that's gonna take up all their opponent's mana. If they had an extra mana, they could perhaps discard it again in the same move to explore again, try and find another land. Right, they have found another land off the top. Here comes Chupacabra. And we can't see who the Chupacabra is targeting. Normally there'd be a little line telling us who the Chupacabra would be targeting, so we can find out who to give hexproof. We're going to cast the Swift Warden and see if we can see who's been targeted by the Chupacabra. Seen people mess it up and click on the Chupacabra and have it destroy itself. But even that showed up as a line back to itself. Right, I see. The Chupacabra himself coming into play was obscuring the card that the Chupacabra wanted to kill, because it was right on the far right. There we go. So Oracle's got hexproof. The ability doesn't resolve. A lot of the time that's how you win in Magic. If you win a sort of 50-50, you win by playing in response, and your ability happens before theirs. You get value out of countering big spells with cheap counter spells. Having creatures with abilities that you can use anytime. So you win in value, sort of even matches. So triggers galore. Gonna get out the Forerunner. Our token blocking army is pretty massive. if we go straight for the Tempest Caller, his ability is whenever he comes into play, tap all the opponent's creatures. So they can't block, and then you can swing in with your entire army. You don't need to worry about unblockable. By tapping all the potential defenders, your opponent just loses, providing you have lethal damage on board, which I presume we do. Forget the misbender. So our opponent is exploring in response, finds another Wildgrowth Walker. Whenever even one of the tokens comes into play, it puts a token, a +1/+1 counter onto our Forerunner. The Deep-Root Waters and the Forerunner work very well together. We'll lay this one drop, just to get a bunch more triggers. Now reverse sneaks up to being a 9/9. It's amazing. Getting the third river sneak was definitely a great plan. We can reliably pick him up and cast him early to go win us a lot of games with this deck. It's quite enjoyable to play the Merfolk. Simple strategy of getting out a million billion Merfolk and winning games. It's worked here. Opponent scoops it up. We didn't make that many changes, but the changes that we made have seemed to have worked out. Still a few cards that we're yet to play with and see the benefit of. We've made our way up to 1,000 coins, so we'll open up a pack. Then I'll leave it for a bit, I'll leave it for a couple of days and come back in, see if our achievements are refreshed, see if we can get perhaps some more coins for attacking with creatures, as simple as that, or winning with a green and blue deck. So open up a pack at Ixalan, see what we get. Well, we did get our 4th River Herald's Boon. I don't think that white bear is gonna help us, certainly not now. So I'll leave it for a couple of days, come back into it, I'll catch up with you there. Till then, good luck in your games of Magic. I'll see you very soon.